Nathan Brooks opened his apartment door and felt his entire life stop. Victoria Hale was standing in his hallway. His CEO, the woman worth $400 million. The woman who had ended careers with 3 words and a look. She was still in her work blazer at 9:47 on a Tuesday night, and she was holding her phone up with the screen facing him. His text, word for word. Glowing like a confession he could never take back. You look too beautiful tonight to spend another minute thinking about work. Let me steal you away somewhere peaceful. Sent to the wrong person. His boss, and she was looking at him like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. Before we go any further, drop a comment below and tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I want to see how far this story has traveled across this country. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next is going to change the way you see everything. Nathan Brooks had a rule about late nights. After 8 p.m. he stopped thinking about work. Stopped checking emails. Stopped being an employee of anything. Because after 8 p.m. he was just a dad, and his daughter Lily needed a dad who was present. Not some hollow-eyed man scrolling through corporate memos while she tried to tell him about her day. He'd made that rule 6 years ago. The night after his ex-wife Sarah had handed him divorce papers at the kitchen table. Explained that she needed to find herself. And caught a one-way flight to Denver, where she'd found herself living with a yoga instructor named Brandon, who was 11 years younger than Nathan, and, from what little he'd seen on social media before he'd had the good sense to stop looking, owned 3 surfboards and one of those specific kinds of smiles that made Nathan feel like he'd aged 40 years overnight. He didn't hate her for it anymore. He was past hate. What he felt now was something quieter and harder to name, a low-grade, persistent loneliness, the kind you learn to carry, the same way other men his age carried bad knees and old back injuries. You adjusted your gait. You kept moving. You didn't talk about it much because there wasn't really a vocabulary for it that didn't make you sound like you were asking for something. But tonight was different than most nights. Tonight, Lily was at his sister Carol's house for a sleepover, the first one in months, and for the first time in what felt like years, Nathan Brooks was alone in his apartment with nothing that needed doing and nobody who needed him. He should have felt free. He felt lost. He made pasta for one and ate it standing at the kitchen counter because it didn't make sense to set the table for a single person. He watched 20 minutes of a baseball game without following any of it. He walked to the refrigerator, stared into it for 30 seconds, closed it without taking anything. He sat on the couch. He stood up. He sat back down. The apartment felt like a question he didn't know how to answer. He picked up his phone. Her name was Rachel. They'd been talking for 3 weeks, matched on the app his buddy Dave had practically installed on his phone with his own hands, because Dave was the kind of happily married man who couldn't stand watching a good friend tread water. Nathan, you're not a monk, Dave had said, with that cheerful, well-meaning exasperation that only people who aren't drowning can manage. You're 44 years old. You deserve a life. An actual life. Not just surviving. So Nathan had gotten out there. Sort of. Rachel was nice. That wasn't a small thing. Nice had become underrated in Nathan's world, where he'd spent years navigating the specific exhaustions of people who wanted things from him. She was a physical therapist, funny in her texts, and she'd mentioned she liked hiking, which Nathan had put on his own profile because it seemed like a reasonable thing to say, even though the last time he'd actually hiked was a company retreat in 2016. That had ended with a twisted ankle and a long conversation with a first aid volunteer named Phil. They'd talked on the phone twice. It was easy. Comfortable. Nothing that knocked him sideways, but at this point in his life, Nathan wasn't entirely sure he was looking to be knocked sideways. Maybe comfortable and easy was the right speed. Maybe comfortable and easy was wisdom, not settling. She'd texted him earlier that evening, stuck working late, thinking about the weekend, looking forward to it. He'd said he was looking forward to it too. And then the conversation had drifted, the way conversations do between two people who like each other but aren't yet sure how much space they're allowed to take up in each other's lives. Now it was almost 10 o'clock and he wanted to say something. Something that wasn't just sounds good or talk soon. Something that felt like actual reaching out, the kind of thing that cost something small but mattered. He started typing. He was tired. Ad. His thumbs weren't sharp. Ad. He'd been staring at a backlit screen since 7 that morning and his eyes felt like sandpaper. Ad. But he typed it out slowly. Ad. Carefully. Ad. The way you do when you're trying to be genuine. Ad. You look too beautiful tonight to spend another minute thinking about work. Let me steal you away somewhere peaceful. He read it back. It was a little cheesy. Maybe more than a little. Ad. But he was 44 years old and had spent 6 years eating pasta standing at a kitchen counter. And he figured he'd earned the right to be cheesy without apology. Ad. He hit send. Ad. He set the phone face down on the coffee table. Ad. 20 seconds passed. Something small and cold moved through the back of his mind. Ad. A little alarm. Ad. The kind that trips without a reason you can name right away. He picked up the phone. He looked at the name at the top of the message thread. And Nathan Brooks felt every single drop of blood leave his body. Victoria Hale. Ad. Not Rachel. Ad. Not Rachel. Ad. Victoria Hale. Ad. The CEO. His CEO. Victoria Hale, who ran a $400 million corporation from the top floor of a 40-story building, who had turned 3 failing companies into industry leaders before the age of 42. Ad. Who had fired a regional director last March for sending a borderline inappropriate joke to a client, who moved through every room she entered, like the room had been waiting for her, and who had never, not once in the 3 years Nathan had worked for her company, looked at him as anything other than a name on a project sheet. Ad. He remembered it now. Arriving in awful pieces, 6 weeks ago she'd texted him directly about a structural flaw in the Peterson account documents. He'd meant to properly label the contact. Ad. He'd kept forgetting. He worked 2 jobs and raised a child and ran on 6 hours of sleep, and apparently that left exactly 0 mental bandwidth for maintaining an organized contact list. Ad. He had sent a flirtatious message to his CEO. Ad. Oh no, he said out loud. He stood up. Ad. He sat back down. Ad. He stood up again. He stared at the phone like the intensity of his gaze might somehow reverse the laws of physics and pull the message back out of her inbox. Ad. Beneath his text in small letters the words sat there like a tiny verdict. Ad. Delivered. Ad. Not unread. Ad. Delivered. Ad. She'd seen the notification. Ad. She had seen the preview. There was, in this universe, no version of this that ended with her not having seen "You look too beautiful tonight." Okay, Nathan said. Ad. He was talking to himself. Ad. He was aware he was talking to himself. Ad. He didn't stop. Okay, alright. Ad. This is fine. Ad. This is not fine. Ad. This is the furthest from fine that anything has ever been. Ad. He needed to send an explanation. Ad. Right now. Immediately. He rehearsed it while his thumbs hovered. Ad. Hale. I owe you the most sincere apology I am capable of forming as a human being. Ad. That message was absolutely intended for someone else. Ad. I have tremendous respect for you, as a professional and a leader, and I am begging you, on behalf of my daughter who needs her father to remain employed. 3 dots appeared on her end. Ad. She was typing. Ad. Nathan made a sound he had never made before in his adult life. Ad. It came from somewhere deep and involuntary, and had no name. The dots disappeared. Ad. He watched the screen. Ad. The dots came back. Disappeared again. He pressed his free hand flat against his sternum, like he could physically hold his heart in place. Ad. He was still standing there, frozen. Ad. Trying to figure out what to type. Ad. When the knock came. Ad. 3 knocks. Evenly spaced. Ad. Deliberate and unhurried, the knock of someone who was completely, absolutely certain of their right to be standing outside your door. Ad. Nathan looked at the front door from across the room. Ad. His brain offered him a rational thought. There is no possible world in which that is Victoria Hale. She doesn't know where you live. Ad. That is not how any of this works. That is your neighbor Gerald, who is always running out of salt. Ad. He crossed the room. Ad. He put his hand on the knob. He opened the door. Ad. Victoria Hale was standing in his hallway. She was precisely as he'd left her at the office that morning, charcoal blazer, dark slacks, dark hair pulled back with that particular controlled precision she applied to everything. Ad. She had a quality of absolute stillness to her, Victoria Hale, that made the air around her feel like it was paying attention. Ad. She was holding her phone loosely at her side. Ad. Screen facing out toward him. Ad. His text message was still on the screen, word for word. Ad. Nathan opened his mouth. Ad. Nothing came out. Ad. You have good taste in words, Victoria said. Ad. Her voice was perfectly even. For someone who sends them to the wrong person. I am, so that was a mistake. I need you to know I would never. Nathan. She said his first name the way you put a period at the end of a sentence. Final, unambiguous. I know it was an accident. I swear to you on everything I know, she said again. He stopped talking. Mostly because his brain had hit a wall, but also because Victoria Hale had this quality. He'd seen it in every meeting he'd ever attended, where she was present, of making additional words from your direction feel not just unnecessary, but almost rude. Like interrupting someone who was thinking. She looked at him steadily. Are you going to invite me in, or should we have this conversation in the hallway? Nathan looked left. His neighbor Gerald, 72 years old, and the most attentive human being currently living in the state of New Jersey, had his door cracked exactly 2 inches. His eyes were visible in the gap. Come in, Nathan said. He stepped back. She walked past him into the apartment. And he had the specific and surreal experience of watching Victoria Hale, a woman whose name appeared in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal and the financial section of every major newspaper, step into his 847-square-foot apartment in Newark, New Jersey, where his daughter's crayon drawings were taped to the refrigerator. She looked around once. It wasn't the look he'd feared, not disdain, not judgment. She just looked, the way a person looks when they're reading a place for what it says about the person who lives there. Her gaze stopped on the refrigerator. Lily's drawing from last week, the 2 of them holding what could charitably be described as hot dogs or swords. Lily small and round, both of them huge grinning mouths and stick-figure arms reaching toward each other. Something moved across Victoria's face. Fast, too fast to name. Your daughter, she said. Yeah, Nathan cleared his throat. Lily, she's 8. She's at my sister's tonight. Victoria nodded once. She stayed near the door, close enough to the exit that it was clearly deliberate. A woman who wanted to be able to leave was a woman maintaining her options. I'm going to be direct with you, she said. Please, Nathan said immediately, because direct was the only version of this conversation that he could survive. I'm asking you, please be direct. You've worked for my company for 3 years, Victoria said. In that time, you've completed every assignment ahead of deadline. You've covered for colleagues without being asked and never sought credit for it. You've handled 2 company restructurings without a single complaint. You show up. You do the work. You go home to your daughter. She paused. The point is, you're not the kind of man who sends inappropriate messages to his employer. So when I received one tonight, I made a reasonable inference. That it was a mistake, Nathan said. That it was a mistake, she confirmed. And then I did something that I would strongly prefer remained between us. He waited. I sat in my car for 4.5 minutes. Victoria said. Deciding whether to call you. Text back. Or pretend it never happened. Something about the precision of that 4.5 minutes did something complicated to Nathan's chest. And instead, he said carefully, you came here. Instead I came here, she held his gaze, which I recognize is not a standard response. No, Nathan agreed. It's no. I'm going to explain my reasoning, because I believe clarity is more efficient than ambiguity. A pause. The message you sent accidentally was the first time in approximately 4 years that anyone has spoken to me as though I were a person and not a title. The apartment went very quiet. Oh, Nathan said. That's the extent of what I intend to say about that. He looked at her. She looked at him. Would you like some coffee? Nathan said. Victoria Hale blinked. For a fraction of a second less than that, she looked surprised. It was the most human expression he'd ever seen on her face. Yes, she said. I would. He made it the way he always made it, the grocery store brand, the kind that came in the large red can, because he was a single father on a project manager's salary, and expensive coffee was for people whose rent was lower. He was half expecting some comment. She didn't make one. She sat at his kitchen table, the small one with the scratch on the corner from when Lily had dragged a toy truck across it 2 years ago, and she wrapped both hands around the mug and drank. Nathan sat across from her. The situation was so far outside any framework he possessed that his mind had stopped trying to categorize it and was simply watching, present and quiet, the way you watch something that doesn't have a name yet. I'm still sorry about the text, he said. I want to be clear. You've said so. I know. I'm saying it again, because I want to be sure you believe me, and you're not. I don't know. Building a case. That thing happened again near the corner of her mouth. Small, almost nothing. I'm not building a case, Victoria said. Good. If I were building a case, she said, I would not have come here for coffee. That's a fair point, Nathan said. He watched her drink. She had that quality of total containment, every movement deliberate, nothing wasted. In a conference room, it read as intimidating. Here, in his kitchen. At 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night, it read as something else entirely. A person working hard to hold a shape. A person who had been holding that shape for so long they'd forgotten there were other shapes available. Can I ask you something, he said. She looked at him. How did you know where I live? HR records. You went into HR records. I'm the CEO. He nodded slowly. That tracks. It was technically inappropriate, she said, with the directness of someone who had thought this through in the car. Accessing personnel information for non-professional purposes. I acknowledge that. I'm not going to report you, Nathan said. I know you're not. Because that would be completely insane. Yes, Victoria said. The entire situation is somewhat insane. A beat, but here we are, Nathan said. But here we are, she agreed. He refilled her coffee without asking. She let him. They talked for a while. He couldn't have said afterward exactly how long, because the conversation had that quality of existing outside of normal time. She asked about Lily, and he found himself telling her the real version. Not the elevator pitch he gave people, the two-sentence summary designed to communicate I have this handled and deflect any incoming pity. The actual version. The first year. When Lily was 2 and didn't understand where her mother was. And Nathan was running on 4 hours of sleep and sheer stubbornness. Working from a laptop balanced on the kitchen counter during nap times. Showing up to parent-teacher prep meetings on so sleep and too much gas station coffee. My sister Carol kept me upright those first 2 years, he said. I mean that literally. I would not have held it together without her. And my buddy Dave. Beyond them, my support system is pretty thin, he paused. That's not a complaint. I've built a good life. It's just smaller than I expected when I was younger. He looked at her. What about you? Victoria was quiet for a moment. What about me? Family. I know what the press releases say. But I don't actually know anything about you. That's intentional, she said. The not knowing or the press releases. The limited public record. She turned her mug slightly on the table. My parents are both gone. I have a brother in Seattle. We speak twice a year, maybe 3 times if there's something specific. A pause. I was married. Another pause. I'm not anymore. I'm sorry, Nathan said. Don't be. She said it without bitterness and without softness, the way you say something you've made your peace with, or almost. It ended for reasons that were both parties' fault. That's the most honest thing I can say about it. That's more than most people manage to say. She looked at him for a moment with those steady, evaluating eyes, and apparently decided he was sincere. You're surprisingly easy to talk to, Victoria said. It's the cheap coffee, Nathan said. Lowers everybody's defenses. The thing near the corner of her mouth. More definite this time. Not quite a smile, but its close relative. The shkeep that comes before a smile. Nathan noticed he was watching for it. He noticed that he noticed. He looked back at his coffee. She left at 11:15. He walked her to the door because that was how he'd been raised. She paused in the doorway with her phone in her hand and looked at him for a moment that lasted about half a beat longer than necessary. This didn't happen, she said. Professionally speaking. Understood. At the office, nothing changes. Nothing changes, he agreed. She nodded. She was already turning when he said it. Victoria. She stopped. He hadn't planned it. Her first name came out the way things come out when you forget to run them past the filter, simple and direct, and a little bit inevitable. She turned back. Whoever it was, Nathan said, that made you feel like you weren't a person. He held her gaze. They were wrong. She looked at him for 3 full seconds. Good night, Nathan, she said. She walked down the hall. Nathan stood in the doorway and watched her go. Gerald's door was cracked 2 inches. Nathan looked at it. Not a word, Gerald, he said. Wouldn't dream of it, Gerald said and shut his door. Nathan didn't sleep much that night. He lay on his back in the dark and tried to organize the last 2 hours into something rational. He was the kind of man who needed cause and effect. He needed to trace a thing back to its source and say, this happened because of that. But this had no rational architecture. He'd sent the wrong text. His CEO had appeared at his door. They'd drunk cheap coffee at his kitchen table and talked about loneliness without ever once using that word. And now she was gone, and the apartment felt different than it had before she walked in, like she'd shifted something in the air without touching anything. The message you sent was the first time in approximately 4 years that anyone has spoken to me like I was a person and not a title. He kept coming back to that sentence. Kept turning it over. He understood it. That was the thing. He understood it in the way that lives below words, in the frequency where one lonely person recognizes another. Because Nathan Brooks knew exactly what it felt like to be reduced to a function. Single dad. Project manager. The guy who covers when you can't make a deadline. Reliable. Invisible. The man you can count on, and therefore the man you forget to actually see. He'd been those things for so long he sometimes forgot what else he was. He fell asleep somewhere after midnight. In the morning he picked up Lily from Carol's. She launched herself at him from the front steps with the full-body momentum of a child who has been separated from her parent for 16 hours and has apparently experienced this as a significant ordeal. Dad, we stayed up until 10. We watched the movie with the dog. Carol let me have 2 hot chocolates. Did she? Nathan said, looking over Lily's head at his sister. Carol shrugged with the unhurried guilt of a woman who is not the one managing the sugar crash. She was fine. She went right to sleep. At 10 p.m. She's 8, Nathan. Carol studied him with the specific attentiveness of an older sister who had known him for 44 years and had therefore developed an ability to read his face the way other people read a newspaper. You look strange, she said. I don't look strange. You have a face. I don't have a face. I have a face. It's attached to my head. Specific face, Carol said. The one you get when something happened and you've already decided not to tell me. Everything's fine. Nothing happened. She held his gaze for another 3 seconds. Then she let it go, not because she believed him, but because Carol had always understood which battles were worth it. Dinner Sunday, she said. Sunday, he said. In the car. Lily talked for 11 uninterrupted minutes about the movie. The hot chocolate. And the fact that Gerald next door apparently had acquired a cat named Noodle. Nathan drove and listened and felt that specific, irreplaceable relief that comes from being needed in a way that makes simple, immediate sense. This was the center. This 8-year-old in the back seat, with her shoes on the wrong feet, and her very strong opinions about everything she'd ever encountered. Everything else, the job, the money stress, the late nights, the long, quiet ache of an apartment that was only ever full when she was in it. All of that was the surrounding territory. Lily was the center. He needed to hold on to that. He needed to hold on to it, especially now, in whatever this was that had started last night in his kitchen. Dad, are you listening? Every word. I said, Gerald's cat is named Noodle. Can we get a cat? We're not getting a cat. What about a fish? We're not getting a fish. Dad, Lily. You are not fun, Lily said with the gravity of a formal ruling. I'm extremely fun, Nathan said. I'm so fun it's become a burden. Lily looked at him in the rearview mirror, with the expression of a person reviewing a claim they have heard before and found historically unsubstantiated. Nathan met her eyes. He smiled. He was going to be fine. Whatever last night had been, whatever inexplicable and unearned and strange and human thing that had been, it was done. Over. This morning was this morning. He was a dad. He was a project manager. Monday would come and Victoria Hale would be the CEO and everything would be exactly the same. Exactly the same. He was wrong, of course. Monday morning. He walked into Hale Corporation at 8 to stopped at his desk, opened his email, and found a message sent at 6:47 a.m. He was being moved off the Peterson infrastructure project, the background assignment he'd been quietly managing for 6 months, and reassigned directly to the executive team. No meeting. No explanation. No context. Effective immediately. VH Nathan read it 3 times. He looked up across the floor at the glass wall of the corner office. Victoria Hale was already at her desk. Already working. Jacket on. Perfect posture. She did not look up. But on the far corner of her desk, visible from across the open floor, was a coffee mug. The same cheap grocery store brand he'd made for her the night before. She'd brought it from home. Nathan looked at that mug for a long time. Then he looked back down at his screen. He opened the briefing documents for his new assignment and started to read. Because Nathan Brooks had spent 6 years teaching himself not to want things that felt too far out of reach. He'd gotten disciplined at it, at looking at certain things from a safe distance, and telling himself that the distance was fine. The distance was sensible. The distance was what a man in his situation did. He was fine with the distance. He glanced up at the mug one more time. Sure you are, said the part of his brain that never knew when to leave him alone. He looked back at the screen. And for the first time in 3 years, Nathan Brooks read every single word of a company briefing document all the way to the end. Not because he had to. Because for the first time in a long time, something had given him a reason to pay attention. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel, asking about the weekend. He picked up the phone, stared at it. Set it face down on the desk. Opened the next briefing document. And somewhere across the open floor, in a corner office with a glass wall and a mug of grocery store coffee, Victoria Hale finally looked up. She didn't look at him for long. But she looked. Nathan spent the rest of that Monday morning in a state he could only describe as controlled disorientation. The executive floor was different from the one he was used to. Up here the carpet was thicker. The air conditioning ran 2 degrees cooler. And the assistants moved with the quiet, efficient urgency of people who had learned that mistakes made on this floor traveled fast and cost more than mistakes made anywhere else in the building. Nathan had visited this floor exactly 4 times in 3 years, always for brief handoff meetings, always out again within 20 minutes. Now there was a nameplate outside a small office 2 doors down from Victoria's. His name, freshly printed, still smelling faintly of toner. He stood in front of it for a long moment before he made himself go inside. You're going to want to review the Meridian file first, said a voice behind him. He turned. A woman in her 30s, sharp blazer, tablet in hand, dark hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked like it had opinions of its own. I'm Priya, she said. Executive operations. Asked me to get you oriented. Nathan Brooks. I know who you are. She said it without any particular inflection, but Nathan felt the sentence land somewhere behind his ribs anyway because he couldn't tell if she meant I was told you were coming or something else entirely. Something closer to everyone up here is wondering why you're here. He decided not to ask. Priya walked him through the basics. Systems access. Calendar protocols. The unofficial rules that govern the top floor rules nobody wrote down because everybody who belonged up here was simply supposed to already know them. Don't schedule anything before Miss Hale's 7 a.m. strategy call. Don't interrupt her during her Thursday afternoon block, which was unlabeled on every calendar but universally understood to be sacred. Don't, under any circumstances, walk into her office without knocking, even if the door is open, even if she's clearly not on a call. Does she explain why she does things? Nathan asked. Or is it just do the thing, don't ask? Priya looked at him for a second too long. She explains when she thinks it's useful. She doesn't explain when she thinks it's a waste of both your time and hers. A pause. For what it's worth, she doesn't usually pull people up from mid-level project management directly onto the executive team. There's normally a process. There wasn't a process this time. No, Priya agreed. There wasn't. She didn't ask why. Nathan got the distinct impression that not asking why was, itself, one of the unwritten rules. He didn't see Victoria until almost noon. She came out of her office already mid-sentence. Talking to someone on a call through her earpiece. Moving through the floor the way weather moves through a valley. Everyone adjusting instinctively. Clearing space. Lowering their voices. She passed Nathan's open door without looking in. Then, 3 steps past it, she stopped. She backed up half a step and looked in at him. Mr. Brooks. Ms. Hale. It was strange, hearing her call him that. It had sounded natural in his kitchen when she'd used his first name, and it sounded strange now, hearing the formal version, Like watching someone put on a coat that used to fit and finding it slightly too small. I need the Meridian risk assessment by end of day, she said. Add crisp, businesslike. Add. Nothing in her tone acknowledged that 2 nights ago she had sat at his kitchen table in a chipped mug drinking grocery store coffee, and told him things about herself she apparently told almost no one. Add. I'll have it, Nathan said. Add. Good. She was already turning to go, phone still to her ear when she paused again. Add. Looked back at him. Something flickered behind her eyes, brief, almost imperceptible, gone before he could name it. Add. Priya will help if you have questions, she said. Add. Don't hesitate. I won't. Add. She left. Nathan sat back down at his new desk and stared at the screen for a full minute without reading a word of it. Add. Nothing changes at the office, she'd said. He supposed technically she was keeping her word. It just didn't feel the way he'd expected it to feel. The Meridian file turned out to be a mess. 3 different departments had submitted conflicting risk numbers, nobody had reconciled the timeline, and the executive summary someone had drafted contradicted its own appendix in at least 4 places. Nathan spent 6 hours untangling it. Missing lunch entirely. Forgetting to eat until his stomach reminded him around 3:30, with an insistence that finally sent him down to the vending machine for a granola bar he ate standing in the stairwell, because it felt strange to eat anything at his new desk yet. Like he hadn't earned the right to relax into the space. By 6:15 he had a clean draft. He read it twice. Tightened 2 paragraphs. And walked it down the hall himself instead of sending it electronically. Because some old-fashioned part of him believed that important things should be handed to a person, not routed through a server. Victoria's door was open. She was alone. Jacket off. Sleeves rolled to the forearm. Reading something on her second monitor with the particular stillness she brought to everything that mattered to her. He knocked on the frame. She looked up. Come in. He set the folder on her desk. Reconciled numbers. I flagged the 2 spots where legal and finance disagree. You'll want to settle those before this goes to the board. She pulled the folder toward her and started reading. Nathan stood there. Unsure whether he was supposed to stay or go. Unsure what the protocol was for a man in his exact position. Which as far as he knew had no protocol because nobody else had ever occupied it. She read for almost 90 seconds without speaking. Then she looked up. This is good work, she said. Better than what came out of finance in 3 weeks. I had motivation. Which was. Not wanting my first executive assignment to be a disaster. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. That same thing from the kitchen. Not quite a smile. The shape before one. You should sit, she said. He hadn't expected that. He sat anyway, in the chair across from her desk, the same kind of controlled surprise he imagined a man might feel being invited past a velvet rope he'd spent years walking past. I want to be honest about something, Victoria said. She closed the folder, set it aside, folded her hands on the desk. The reassignment wasn't random. I gathered that. I've had your file pulled for 2 years, she said. Not because of anything personal. Because you're good at your job, and I don't waste good people on mid-level assignments longer than I have to. I should have moved you up 18 months ago. I didn't because she stopped. Started again. Because I have a policy about not letting anything personal influence a professional decision, and I was worried that after Tuesday night, promoting you would look or feel like it was about anything other than merit. But you did it anyway. And I did it anyway. She met his eyes directly. Because the work justified it independent of everything else, and because pretending otherwise would have been its own kind of dishonesty. I don't like dishonesty. Even the well-intentioned kind. Nathan sat with that for a second. Thank you, he said. For being straight with me. I'm always straight with you, she said. It's one of the few luxuries I allow myself. That became, without either of them quite naming it, the shape of the next several weeks. At the office. Everything was exactly as advertised professional. Contained correct. Victoria Hale gave direction. Nathan executed it. And if either of them thought about a kitchen table and a chipped coffee mug. Neither said so out loud during business hours. But there were other hours. It started small. A text on a Wednesday night, nothing romantic. Just a follow-up question about a client deliverable that could easily have waited until morning. Nathan answered it. She replied. The reply led to another question. Unrelated to work. About whether he'd ever dealt with a particular vendor before, and somewhere in the exchange. The conversation stopped being about the vendor. How's Lily? She wrote. Out of nowhere. Around 10 p.m. on a Thursday. Convinced she needs a cat. Building a very sophisticated legal case for it. I think she's been watching too many courtroom dramas with my sister. Does she have precedent? She's citing Gerald has one, and Gerald is old and can barely take care of himself, so clearly I could handle it better. That's not a bad argument. Don't encourage her. I would never. He'd smiled at his phone in the dark of his living room, alone. Lily asleep down the hall. And felt something loosen in his chest that had been tight for longer than he could easily measure. The text became a habit. Not every night, some nights nothing came. And Nathan told himself firmly that this was fine. That he wasn't checking his phone more than usual. That he hadn't started leaving it face up on the coffee table, instead of face down out of some half-admitted hope. He told himself a number of things during those weeks that he didn't entirely believe. Dave noticed first, because Dave noticed everything, in the specific and irritating way that happily married men who've forgotten what it's like to be uncertain about anything tend to notice things. They were at the diner they went to most Saturdays, when Lily was with Carol, a ritual older than Nathan's divorce. Older than most things in his current life. And Dave was halfway through a plate of eggs when he set his fork down and looked at Nathan, with the particular expression of a man about to say something he'd clearly been sitting on. You've been weird, Dave said. I have not been weird. You've been weird for 3 weeks. You keep checking your phone at the table. Which you never do. And last Tuesday you told me a story about a coffee mug that had absolutely no punchline. And you told it like it mattered. It's a nice mug. Nathan exhaled and set down his own fork. It's complicated. How complicated? My CEO complicated. Dave stared at him for a full 5 seconds, fork frozen halfway to his mouth, eggs forgotten. Your CEO. Victoria Hale. The one from the magazine covers. The one who fired a guy for That's the one. Nathan, I know. What happened? So Nathan told him. All of it, the text sent to the wrong person. The knock on the door 5 minutes later. The coffee. The conversation. The promotion that wasn't random. The late-night texts about vendor issues that turned into late-night texts about nothing in particular. Dave listened with the wide-eyed stillness of a man watching a car crash unfold slowly enough that he had time to feel every second of it. Okay, Dave said finally. First, what happened to Rachel? Nathan winced. He'd been avoiding that question in his own head for 2 weeks, which was itself an answer he didn't especially want to look at directly. I called it off. Told her I wasn't in a place to give her what she deserved. It was true. It just wasn't the whole truth. Nathan, I know. You're not exactly in a position to give this other thing what it deserves either. She's your boss. I know that too. Does she know that you know that? We haven't exactly named anything. It's texts. It's coffee. It's nothing, technically. Dave gave him a long look, the look of a man who had known Nathan since we're 22 years old and had watched him build his entire adult identity around the careful management of disappointment. You've spent 6 years telling yourself you're fine being alone because it's safer than wanting something and not getting it. I love you, man, but I've watched you do this. You build the wall so high nothing can get over it, including the good stuff. That's not fair. It's completely fair and you know it. Dave leaned back. So let me ask you something. Do you like her? Actually like her? Not the mystery of it. Not the fact that a powerful, beautiful, untouchable woman showed up at your door because you accidentally sent her a good line, the actual her. The person. Nathan thought about the kitchen table. The mug in both her hands. The way she'd said 4.5 minutes like precision was the only language she trusted. The way her face had done that small, careful thing near her mouth when he made her laugh. Like laughing was a muscle she hadn't fully trusted in years and was testing gently. One small movement at a time. Yeah, Nathan said quietly. I like her. The actual her. Then stop hiding behind it's nothing, technically, Dave said. Because nothing, technically, is what men say right before they lose something because they were too scared to call it what it was. He thought about that conversation for days. He thought about it especially on the Friday afternoon 3 weeks into the new assignment. When Victoria called an unscheduled meeting with the executive team and Nathan watched her run the room the way he imagined generals ran battlefields, decisive, unshakable, 3 steps ahead of every objection before it was raised. A senior VP named Marcus Whitfield tried to push back on her restructuring proposal for the Meridian account, and Victoria dismantled his objection in under 90 seconds with a calm precision that left the room slightly stunned into silence. Nathan watched her do it and felt something complicated. Admiration, certainly, but also a small, quiet ache at watching her operate at full armor, knowing now what was underneath it, and understanding that almost nobody else in that room had any idea. After the meeting broke, Marcus lingered near Nathan's desk on his way out. Careful, Marcus said, low enough that only Nathan could hear. Excuse me? You got pulled up to executive level faster than anyone I've seen in 15 years here. People notice things like that. Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes, especially when the person doing the pulling is Victoria Hale. And the person getting pulled is a single dad from project management with no MBA and no board connections. Nathan felt heat climb up the back of his neck. I earned the assignment. I'm sure you did, Marcus said in a tone that suggested the opposite. Just watch yourself. People are already talking. He walked away before Nathan could respond. Nathan sat at his desk for a long time after that, staring at nothing. That specific old feeling rising in him, the one from years of being underestimated. The one that had followed him since Sarah left. Since coworkers had quietly assumed a single father couldn't really compete. Couldn't really be serious about a career. Was probably just scraping by and lucky to be kept on at all. He'd spent 6 years proving that feeling wrong through sheer, quiet competence, never asking for recognition, never making noise, just doing the work and hoping the work would eventually speak for itself. And now, 3 weeks into the best professional break of his life, someone had managed to make it feel small and suspicious in under 2 minutes. He didn't tell Victoria about the conversation. He told himself it wasn't worth bringing to her, that he could handle office politics on his own, that involving her would only prove Marcus's point that Nathan needed Victoria to fight his battles for him. He was wrong about that. But he didn't know it yet. The following Tuesday, Victoria asked him to stay after a strategy session that ran long. The rest of the executive team filed out. Nathan lingered, gathering his notes, and she waited until the door closed behind the last person before she spoke. You've seemed distracted this week, she said. I'm fine. You gave the wrong quarterly figure twice in the last meeting. You've never made that mistake before, she studied him. Something happened. He considered lying. He was tired of lying. Or of the smaller, more exhausting cousin of lying, omission. Careful phrasing. Letting people believe what was easiest. Marcus Whitfield cornered me after the restructuring meeting last week, Nathan said. Told me people are talking. About the promotion. About why a project manager with no MBA got pulled onto the executive floor faster than anyone in 15 years. Something in Victoria's face went very still, not soft. Still, in the specific way a surface goes still right before something breaks through it. What exactly did he say? That people notice things. That I should watch myself. Nathan met her eyes. He didn't say it outright, but the implication was clear enough. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. I'll handle it, she said. You don't have to. I do, actually. Her voice had an edge to it now, controlled but unmistakable. Marcus Whitfield has spent 6 years accumulating small, deniable cruelties toward anyone he perceives as beneath him, and I have spent 6 years being too focused on quarterly numbers to address it properly. That's a failure on my part, not yours. I don't want special treatment, Nathan said. I don't want people saying I only got here because You didn't get here because of anything except your own work, Victoria said, sharp now. I told you that already, and I don't repeat myself for people I respect, so I need you to actually hear it. If Marcus Whitfield has a problem with a talented employee earning a promotion, that's Marcus Whitfield's problem, and I will address it as his employer, not as anything else. Nathan didn't say anything for a moment. Okay, he said finally. She exhaled, some of the sharpness leaving her shoulders. I'm sorry you had to deal with that alone for a week. You're not the one who said it. No, she agreed. But I'm the reason it was said. That makes it my responsibility. He looked at her, really looked, the way he'd started allowing himself to over these past 3 weeks, and saw something underneath the executive composure that he recognized, because he'd worn a version of it himself for 6 years. The exhausting work of being strong in every room all the time, because the alternative felt like handing people a weapon. Can I ask you something? Nathan said. You usually do. Is it always like this for you? People assuming the worst about anything that looks like kindness. Victoria was quiet for a moment. Yes, she said. For a long time now. Since your marriage. Her eyes flickered surprise, maybe that he'd asked so directly, or maybe just recognition that he'd noticed the shape of the thing she rarely spoke about. She didn't answer right away. Before that, if I'm honest, she said finally. My marriage simply confirmed what I already suspected, that kindness, in the world I operate in, gets read as either weakness or manipulation. There's rarely a third option offered. That sounds lonely. It is, she said it simply, without self-pity, the way you'd report a fact about the weather. I've built my entire adult life around not needing anyone to offer a third option. It's more efficient that way. Efficient, Nathan repeated. Don't, she said, but there was no real heat in it. I'm not judging you, he said. I know what that costs. Being efficient instead of needing things. I've been doing a version of it myself for 6 years. She looked at him for a long moment. I know, she said quietly. That's part of why I came to your door. Nothing happened between them that night. No declaration. No crossed line, just two people standing a little closer than professional distance required. In an empty conference room after everyone else had gone home. Admitting small true things to each other, because it was easier in the quiet than it would ever be in the daylight. But something had shifted. Nathan could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm, not dramatic yet, but unmistakable. The sense that something had been set in motion that neither of them fully controlled anymore. Marcus Whitfield was gone within 2 weeks, not fired outright, which Victoria explained to Nathan later would have opened the company to a wrongful termination claim, given how carefully Marcus had always kept his comments, just short of anything actionable, but rather restructured into an advisory role at a subsidiary office 3 states away, with a severance package generous enough that even Marcus couldn't credibly complain about it publicly. That's not petty, Victoria said when Nathan raised an eyebrow at the timeline. That's strategic. There's a difference. Feels a little petty. I contain multitudes, she said, and this time the thing near the corner of her mouth was, unmistakably a smile. Lily met her by accident 3 weeks after that, in a way that neither Nathan nor Victoria had planned. It happened on a Saturday. Nathan had brought Lily into the office to grab a folder he'd forgotten, a rare weekend visit. Quick in and out. Lily bouncing along beside him in her favorite yellow rain boots even though it wasn't raining, because Lily's fashion choices operated on a logic entirely her own. They rounded the corner near the elevator bank and nearly collided with Victoria, who was there, for the same reason most executives ended up at the office on a Saturday, because there was no meaningful line between her work life and the rest of her life, and Nathan understood now, with a small ache, exactly why that was. Victoria stopped short, looked down. Lily looked up at her with the frank, unfiltered assessment that only an 8-year-old can produce, taking in the sharp blazer, the composed posture, the entire unmistakable importance radiating off this stranger, and instead of being intimidated, Lily simply asked, are you a queen? Nathan opened his mouth to apologize. Victoria beat him to it. She crouched down, actually crouched, knees bent, bringing herself level with an 8-year-old in yellow rain boots, an image so far outside anything Nathan had ever associated with Victoria Hale that he nearly forgot to breathe. No, Victoria said with total seriousness. I just work here. But that's a very good question. You look like a queen, Lily said. Dad said you're his boss. I am his boss. Are you nice? Victoria considered this with the same gravity she brought to a board presentation. I try to be. I don't always succeed. Do you think I look nice? Lily studied her for a long moment. You have a nice smile, she decided. You should do it more. Something passed across Victoria's face quick. unguarded, gone before Nathan could fully name it, though he thought, watching it, that it looked almost exactly like the expression of someone being handed something they hadn't realized they were allowed to want. I'll work on that, Victoria said. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. She turned to Nathan. Can we get pizza after this? We can get pizza. Can she come? Lily asked, jerking a thumb at Victoria with the casual authority of a child who has not yet learned that adults generally require more formal invitations. Nathan felt his whole body go warm and then cold in quick succession. Lily, I have a meeting, Victoria said gently, before Nathan had to figure out how to answer for both of them. But I'd like a rain check. If that's all right with you. What's a rain check? It means next time, Victoria said. I promise. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with the concept of a promise, and grabbed Nathan's hand, already pulling him toward the elevator, already moving on to the next thing in the specific, forward-moving way of children. Nathan let himself be pulled a few steps before he looked back. Victoria was still watching them go. Something in her face open, unarmored, entirely undefended that Nathan had never seen in 3 years of working for her. She caught him looking. The armor came back up, fast but not quite fast enough. Monday, she said. The meridian numbers. Monday, Nathan agreed. The elevator doors closed. That night, after Lily was asleep, his phone buzzed. Your daughter has better instincts than half my board. He smiled at the screen in the dark. She's going to hold you to that pizza. I intend to keep the promise. There was a pause. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again, the same nervous rhythm from the very first night, when she'd been deciding whether to knock on his door at all. I haven't crouched down to talk to a child in longer than I can remember, she wrote finally. I forgot what it felt like to have someone look at me and see something other than a title. Nathan stared at the message for a long moment before he answered. That's the second time you've said something like that to me. Is it becoming a pattern you find concerning? I find it becoming a pattern I don't want to stop. He wrote, and then sat there with his thumb hovering over the send button for almost a full minute before he made himself press it. Because Dave was right. Because 6 years of careful distance had cost him things he was only now starting to name. Because somewhere between a wrong text and a coffee mug, and a crouching queen and a little girl in yellow rain boots, Nathan Brooks had started wanting something again. He sent it. The reply took 4 minutes. I don't want it to stop either, Victoria wrote. Which terrifies me more than almost anything in my professional life ever has. Nathan read it twice. Then he set the phone down on the nightstand, face up this time, and lay in the dark of his small apartment, listening to Lily's breathing through the thin wall, and let himself feel, for the first time in 6 years, something that wasn't careful. It felt like hope. It also distantly, felt like danger, the kind that comes right before something good is tested by something old and unresolved, the kind of quiet before a storm that neither of them could yet see gathering on the horizon of Victoria's past, in the shape of a man named Adrian Cross, who was, at that very moment, 3 states away, reading a headline about Hale Corporation's quarterly earnings, and smiling in a way that had nothing to do with happiness at all. Adrian Cross called on a Wednesday morning, and Victoria knew who it was before she even looked at the screen, because her body reacted before her mind did, a tightening at the base of her throat, a coldness moving down through her chest that she hadn't felt in almost 3 years and had, until that exact moment, genuinely believed she'd outgrown. She let it ring twice, long enough to prove to herself she could. Victoria, his voice hadn't changed. That was the thing that struck her hardest, not the words, not even the audacity of the call itself, but the sheer, unchanged familiarity of that voice, still carrying that particular warm, reasonable tone he'd always used right before he said something designed to take something from her. It's been a while. 3 years, Victoria said. Not nearly long enough. That's not very generous. I'm not interested in being generous with you, Adrian. What do you want? A pause on the line, theatrical. She knew, because everything Adrian did was theatrical, calibrated for maximum effect, a performance staged for an audience of exactly one. I have a proposal. Business, not personal. I'm putting together an acquisition group interested in Hale Corporation's logistics division. I thought, given our history, you'd appreciate hearing about it from me directly, rather than reading about it in a filing. Victoria closed her eyes. She'd built the logistics division from nothing 8 years ago before Adrian. Actually, one of the few parts of her company that predated him entirely. Which was, she suspected, exactly why he wanted it. Not because it was the most valuable piece of Hale Corporation, because it was hers in a way nothing else quite was, and taking it, or trying to, would hurt in a specific, personal way that a purely financial target never could. You're not getting it, Victoria said. I haven't made an offer yet. You don't need to. I know what this is. Do you? His voice cooled slightly, the reasonable warmth thinning at the edges to reveal something harder underneath the thing that had always been underneath, the thing it'd taken her 4 years of marriage to fully recognize, and 18 months of divorce proceedings to fully escape. Because from where I'm sitting, Victoria, you're a woman running a company with an unusually soft board this quarter, distracted by what is it now, some kind of personal situation with a subordinate, people talk, even in your carefully controlled world, people talk, Victoria's hand tightened around the phone. That's none of your business. Everything about you used to be my business, Adrian said. Old habits. We're divorced, Adrian. I'm aware. I signed the papers, if you recall. A short, humorless laugh. I'm not calling to relitigate the marriage, Victoria. I'm calling because I think you should know what's coming, professionally, before it arrives. I'd hate for you to be blindsided. I appreciate the warning, Victoria said, in a voice so flat it could have cut glass. Consider your warning delivered. We're done here. She hung up before he could respond. She sat very still at her desk for almost a full minute, phone flat on the surface in front of her, breathing in a slow, deliberate rhythm she'd learned from a therapist she'd stopped seeing 2 years ago because she'd convinced herself she no longer needed it. She needed it now. She just wasn't going to admit that to anyone. The first article ran 4 days later. It wasn't about the logistics division. It wasn't even really about business at all. It was from Danz's business story, filed under the corporate section of a mid-tier financial news site, but the actual content of it, the part designed to be read and shared and whispered about, had almost nothing to do with acquisitions. Hale Corporation CEO's judgment questioned amid reports of workplace favoritism. Nathan read it standing at his desk, coffee going cold in his hand, the words arranging themselves into something that made his stomach drop before he'd even finished the first paragraph. The piece didn't name him directly, not at first, not in the opening, but it didn't need to. It described, with just enough specificity to be recognizable to anyone inside the company, a junior employee elevated to the executive team under circumstances several sources describe as unusual, and then, 3 paragraphs later, dropped his actual title, which in a company the size of Hale Corporation was as good as printing his name. His phone buzzed. Dave, you seeing this? You okay? Nathan didn't answer right away. He was still reading, and the article, as it continued, got worse, quoting unnamed sources familiar with the company, who suggested that Victoria Hale's decision-making had grown increasingly personal rather than strategic in recent months, that her judgment, long considered her defining strength, was now a subject of internal concern. He set the phone down. He looked up. Across the open floor, through the glass wall of her office, Victoria was standing perfectly still, staring at her own monitor, her face doing the thing it did in board meetings when she was working very hard to give away nothing at all. Nathan got up and walked over. He knocked on the frame the way he always did. She didn't look up right away. You've seen it, he said. I've seen it. Victoria. I need you to close the door, she said. He did. The floor outside kept moving. Kept humming with its normal Wednesday activity. Entirely oblivious or entirely aware, Nathan genuinely couldn't tell which was worse, while inside the glass box of her office, something had gone very quiet and very careful. This is Adrian, Victoria said. Her voice was controlled in a way that Nathan had learned, over the past weeks, to recognize as more dangerous than shouting would have been. Controlled meant she was holding something down with both hands. He called 4 days ago. Told me something was coming. I didn't think. She stopped. Pressed her palms flat against the desk. I should have told you. Who's Adrian? My ex-husband. She said it like she was setting down something heavy. He runs an acquisition firm. He's trying to take the logistics division, and apparently he's decided that discrediting me personally is a faster route to a lower valuation than doing it through legitimate channels. Nathan felt something cold settle in his chest. And I'm the discrediting material. You're not material, Victoria said sharply. You're a person, and he's using you as a weapon against me, which is exactly the kind of thing he's always been extremely good at. I don't care about being used as a weapon against you, Nathan said. I care about what this does to you. What it's already doing. He gestured at the article still open on her monitor. This isn't going to stop with one piece. No, Victoria agreed quietly. It's not. She was right. By Friday, 2 more outlets had picked up the story. Each one adding its own layer of speculation. Each one slightly less careful than the last about implying, rather than stating outright. By the following Monday, someone inside the company, Nathan never found out who, though he had suspicions he never voiced out loud, had leaked internal gossip to a reporter, and the story shifted from vague implication to something much closer to specific accusation. That Nathan Brooks, single father, project manager with no advanced degree, had been elevated to the executive team not on merit, but through some undefined personal relationship with the CEO. The comments online were worse than the articles. Nathan made the mistake of reading them exactly once. Late at night. After Lily was asleep. And regretted it immediately. Strangers with usernames instead of faces. Confidently dissecting his career. His character. His fitness as a father. Based on 3 paragraphs of speculation and a photo of him from a company gala 18 months ago where he'd been standing, entirely by coincidence, 3 feet from Victoria in a crowded room. He closed the laptop. He sat in the dark of his living room for a long time. He thought about Lily, asleep down the hall, who had no idea any of this was happening, who thought her father worked hard and got promoted because he was good at his job, which was true, which had always been true, and who would, if this kept escalating, eventually be old enough to type his name into a search engine and find every one of these articles waiting for her. That thought did something to him that none of the professional damage had managed to do. It made him afraid. At the office, the whispers followed him everywhere. People who had been perfectly friendly for 3 years suddenly found reasons to avoid eye contact in the hallway. A junior analyst named Ben, who'd worked directly under Nathan during the Peterson project and had always been friendly, warm, quick with a joke, now nodded stiffly and found urgent business elsewhere whenever Nathan approached. In the break room, conversation stopped a half-second too late when he walked in, not fast enough to hide that they'd been happening, slow enough to make clear exactly what they'd been about. He heard fragments. Wonder what he actually did to get up there. Must be nice. Poor guy, raising a kid alone, and now this. That last one stung worse than outright hostility would have, because it dressed contempt up as sympathy, made him an object of pity rather than respect. Exactly the thing he'd spent 6 years fighting against. He held it together in the office. He always held it together in the office. That was the one discipline he'd never lost. Not once, not in 6 years of single fatherhood and financial strain and quiet exhaustion. He did his job. He did it well. He answered every whisper with better work, the way he always had, because it was the only weapon he'd ever really trusted. But it cost him something. He could feel it costing him something, a slow drain he couldn't quite locate the bottom of. Victoria noticed. Of course she noticed. Victoria noticed everything. It was one of the qualities that had made her formidable in every boardroom she'd ever entered. And it made her equally formidable, equally relentless, at noticing the particular new tightness around Nathan's eyes, the half-second longer it took him to answer a simple question, the way he'd started eating lunch at his desk instead of in the break room. She called him into her office on a Thursday evening, after most of the floor had cleared out. Sit down, she said. He sat. I've made a decision, Victoria said. I'm having legal draft a statement. It will clarify, publicly and specifically, that your promotion was based entirely on merit, backed by documentation of your performance record, and it will make clear that any further insinuation otherwise will be treated as defamation. Victoria minus. Add. I've also engaged a firm to look into the source of the internal leak. Whoever gave a reporter access to internal HR discussions violated confidentiality agreements, and I intend to find out who. Victoria, stop. He said it firmly enough that she actually stopped, mid-sentence, and looked at him with something like surprise. You're doing the thing again. Add. What thing? The thing where you handle everything alone. Add. Where you turn every problem into a plan you execute by yourself, instead of he gestured vaguely between them. Add. Instead of talking to me about it first. Add. I appreciate the statement. Add. I do, but you didn't ask me if I wanted one. Add. I was trying to protect you. Add. I know. That's not the same as including me. He leaned forward. Add. This is happening to both of us, Victoria. Add. Not just to you managing a crisis and me being the crisis. Add. I'm a person in the middle of this too, and I'd like to be treated like one. Something flickered across her face, not quite hurt. Something closer to recognition, the specific discomfort of being told a true thing about yourself that you already half knew but had never had to hear out loud. Add. You're right, she said, quieter now. Add. I apologize. Add. You don't have to apologize. Add. He rubbed a hand over his face. I need you to let me in. All the way in. Not just the parts that are easy. She was quiet for a long moment. Adrian isn't just an ex-husband with a grudge, she said finally. Add. He's someone who spent 4 years teaching me. Add. Very patiently. Add. Very methodically. Add. That anything I cared about could and would be used against me. He didn't do it with shouting. He did it with small things, noticing what mattered to me, and then finding quiet, deniable ways to threaten it, just enough to remind me he could. By the time I left him, I'd stopped telling him anything real, because everything real became a target. She looked up at Nathan. I've spent 3 years since the divorce rebuilding a version of myself that doesn't hand anyone that kind of access again. And now he's using you, the one person I've let close in years, as exactly the kind of target I swore I'd never create again. I'm not handling this alone because I don't trust you. I'm handling it alone because handling things alone is the only way I know how to keep the people I care about from becoming leverage. Nathan absorbed that in silence for a moment. Add. I understand why you learned that, he said finally. And I do. But Victoria, I'm already leveraged. Add. That happened the moment his people started digging. The only question now is whether you let me help you fight it. Add. Or whether you protect me right out of the conversation entirely. Add. And either way, add. I'm already standing in the blast radius. Add. I'd rather stand in it next to you than off to the side, wondering what you're doing about it. Add. She looked at him for a long moment. Add. Something in her face was working very hard to stay composed. Add. Okay, she said finally. Together. Add. Together, he agreed. For a moment, add. Sitting across from her in the quiet, add. Emptied out office, add. Nathan let himself believe that would be enough. Add. He was wrong. Add. But he wouldn't understand exactly how wrong for another 9 days. The final article was the one that broke something. Add. It ran on a Saturday, which felt deliberate to Nathan, even though he had no way of proving it. The timing to the story him over a weekend, gathering shares and comments and speculation before anyone at Hale Corporation could formally respond. This one had a name attached to a source for the first time. Though Nathan would later learn the name belonged to someone who'd never actually worked directly with either of them. Add. A disgruntled former employee with an axe to grind who'd been happy to supply quotes that sounded authoritative and were almost entirely fabricated. Add. The headline read, Hale CEO's Cinderella story, employee faces scrutiny over qualifications. Board reportedly concerned. Add. The board reportedly concerned part wasn't true. Nathan knew, because Victoria told him directly that the board had said nothing of the kind, that in fact 2 board members had personally called Victoria that weekend to express support and irritation at the media cycle. Add. But by the time that truth existed, add. The headline had already been shared 11,000 times, add. And the truth, add, as it so often did, add, was arriving late to a fight the lie had already mostly won. Add. Nathan's sister Carol called him Saturday afternoon, voice tight with worry she was trying and failing to keep out of it. Add. Nathan, Lily's going to hear about this eventually. Kids at school talk. Add. Parents talk. Add. You need to think about. Add. I know, Carol. Add. I'm not trying to pile on. I'm trying to help you think ahead. Add. I know, he said again. Add. Softer this time. Add. Because he could hear that she meant it kindly. Add. That underneath the worry was just his sister. Add. The person who'd held him up through the worst 2 years of his life. Ad. Doing what she'd always done, trying to protect him before the damage arrived instead of after. Ad. He hung up and sat with his phone in his hand for a long time, staring at nothing. Then he made a decision he would, later, understand as the turning point of everything that followed. Ad. He texted Victoria, "We need to talk in person." Ad. Tonight if you can. Ad. Her reply came fast, "My place. I'll send the address." Ad. He'd never been to her apartment before. It occupied the top 2 floors of a converted industrial building downtown. Had all exposed brick and floor-to-ceiling windows. Ad. A space that felt less like a home, and more like a carefully composed photograph of what a successful person's home was supposed to look like: beautiful, spare, and Ad. Nathan noticed almost immediately, Ad. Strangely empty of anything personal. No photographs. No clutter. Ad. No evidence, anywhere he looked, that an actual life happened inside these walls. Victoria opened the door before he could knock, which told him she'd been watching for him, which told him something about her state of mind that she hadn't yet said out loud. Ad. Come in, she said. Ad. He stepped inside. The space swallowed the sound of his footsteps. This is a beautiful apartment, he said. Ad. Because it was true. Ad. And because he didn't yet know what else to say. Ad. It's a well-decorated apartment, Victoria said. There's a difference. She gestured toward a low couch. Sit, please. Ad. He sat. She didn't join him, she stood near the window instead. Arms crossed, looking out at the city rather than at him, and Nathan recognized the posture immediately, because he'd seen a version of it in his own mirror plenty of times over the years. Ad. It was the posture of someone bracing for something. Ad. I've been thinking. Ad. Victoria said. Ad. Still facing the window. Ad. About what's fair to ask of you. Ad. Okay, Adrian isn't going to stop. Ad. I know him. This is what he does. He finds the pressure point, and he applies it until something breaks, and right now, the pressure point is you. Ad. She turned around finally. Ad. And her face had gone somewhere. Nathan hadn't seen it go before, controlled. Ad. But in the specific, Ad. Brittle way of someone controlling something that was very close to breaking. Your name is attached to every article now. Ad. Your daughter's school could find out. Your reputation, which you built over 6 years of doing everything right, is being dismantled in real time because of something that started with a wrong text message and became this. Ad. I know all of that, Nathan said carefully. Ad. I've been living all of that for 2 weeks. Ad. I think Victoria said that the only way to make it stop is to make it not exist. Nathan felt something cold move through him. What are you saying? Ad. I'm saying, she said, and her voice cracked slightly on the words. The first real crack he'd heard in it since the night she'd shown up at his door. That if there's no relationship for Adrian to weaponize, there's no story. If we go back to being exactly what we're supposed to be, CEO and employee, nothing more, the narrative collapses on its own within a news cycle or two. Ad. People move on. Your name stops being attached to headlines. Ad. Your daughter never has to Google it. Victoria minus. Ad. I think we should stop, she said. Whatever this is. Ad. I think we should stop it now, before it costs you more than it's already cost. The room went very quiet. Nathan stood up slowly. Ad. You're doing it again. Ad. Doing what? Ad. The thing you just apologized for 4 days ago. Ad. The thing where you decide alone. Ad. What's best for both of us. Ad. And then you execute it. Ad. And you frame it as protecting me. Ad. When really he stopped. Ad. Working to keep his voice steady. Ad. Really, it's protecting yourself. Because if you push me away now on your terms, then Adrian doesn't get the satisfaction of doing it to you. You get to be the one who ends it. Ad. You get to control the loss instead of having it happen to you. That's not, her voice wavered. Ad. That's not what this is. Ad. Isn't it? He took a step closer. You told me, in your own kitchen, my kitchen, that you'd built 4 years of marriage learning that anything you cared about became a weapon someone could use against you. Ad. And now the first real thing you've let yourself care about in years is under attack, and instead of fighting for it, you're doing the thing you always do. Ad. You're protecting yourself from being hurt again, Victoria, and you're calling it protecting me. That's not fair. Ad. Maybe not. Ad. But it's true, and you know it's true, because you just told me you don't like dishonesty. Ad. Even the well-intentioned kind. He held her gaze, unwilling to look away, even though every instinct told him this was the moment things could break beyond repair. You keep protecting yourself from being hurt, but you don't realize you're also pushing away everyone who actually cares about you. Ad. Victoria's composure finally cracked all the way open. Ad. You don't understand what he's capable of. Ad. she said, and her voice had gone thin, stripped of every ounce of the executive armor Nathan had watched her wear in every boardroom for 3 years. You didn't watch it happen the first time. You didn't watch him take something I loved and turn it into a liability, over and over, for 4 years, until I stopped loving anything at all because it was safer that way. I built this, she gestured at the apartment, at herself, at the entire architecture of the life she'd constructed since the divorce, so that he could never do that to me again. And now you're standing here, telling me I'm doing exactly what I swore I'd never do, and the terrifying part, Nathan, the actual terrifying part, is that you're right. Then don't do it, Nathan said quietly. Don't let him win by making you into the person who pushes away the one good thing that's happened to you in years. And if I don't push you away and he destroys everything anyway, what then? What do I tell myself when it's gone and I let it happen with my eyes open? Then at least it was real while it lasted, Nathan said. At least you didn't kill it yourself out of fear, before he even had the chance to try. Victoria stood at the window, arms wrapped around herself now, and for a long moment, she said nothing at all. I need you to leave, she said finally, and her voice had gone flat, controlled again, the armor sliding back into place with an efficiency that told Nathan exactly how much practice she'd had at doing precisely this. I need to think. Alone, Victoria might. Please, Nathan. Her eyes met his, and underneath the flatness he could see something raw and frightened that she was working very hard to bury. Please, just go. He looked at her for a long moment. He wanted to argue. He wanted to cross the room and take her by the shoulders and tell her that running from this wouldn't make the fear go away. It would just guarantee she spent the rest of her life alone with it. But he also understood, in some deep and old part of himself, that a person cornered by fear couldn't be argued out of it in a single conversation. Sometimes all you could do was leave the door open and hope they eventually walked through it themselves. Okay, he said quietly. I'll go. He walked to the door. He paused there, hand on the handle, and looked back at her one more time standing alone in her beautiful, empty apartment, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than he had ever seen her look in 3 years of watching her command every room she entered. For what it's worth, Nathan said, I'm not him. I never asked you for anything except honesty. And I'm still not asking for anything else now. He left before she could answer. He stood in the hallway outside her door for almost a full minute, half hoping to hear it open behind him, half hoping she'd call his name, half hoping for anything at all. Nothing came. He walked to the elevator alone. The following Monday she was cold again. Not cruel. Victoria Hale was never cruel, but distant in the precise, professional way she'd been distant with him for the first 3 years he'd worked for her, before any of this had started. She gave direction. He executed it. She didn't ask about Lily. She didn't text him at 10 o'clock at night about vendor issues that weren't really about vendors. The mug, the cheap grocery store mug she'd started keeping on the corner of her desk, disappeared sometime that week, and Nathan noticed its absence the way you notice a missing tooth, a small gap where something used to be that your tongue kept finding anyway. He didn't chase her. He'd promised himself he wouldn't, not because he'd stopped caring, but because he understood, with a clarity that surprised him, that some things couldn't be pursued into existence. Some things had to be chosen freely, or they weren't worth having at all. So he did what he'd always done. He worked. He picked Lily up. He went to Carol's for Sunday dinner and let his sister worry over him without confirming exactly how much there was to worry about. He waited. And 3 weeks later, on a Sunday evening, when Lily was building an elaborate pillow fort in the living room and Nathan was pretending to read while actually watching her, with the particular, aching tenderness that came easily to him these days, his phone rang. Not a text. A call. He looked at the screen. Victoria Hale. He stepped into the kitchen, heart suddenly loud in his own ears, and answered. Nathan, she said. Her voice sounded different than it had in 3 weeks of clipped office correspondence. Smaller, more honest. It's me, just me. Not the CEO, just Victoria. Nathan closed his eyes and leaned against the counter, the same counter where he'd once eaten pasta alone and felt like his whole life was a question he didn't know how to answer. I'm listening, he said quietly. Ad. And on the other end of the line, 3 weeks of silence finally began to break. "I'm afraid," Victoria said, and the word landed in Nathan's ear, like something breaking loose after being held too tightly for too long. "I've been afraid for 3 weeks. I told myself I was thinking clearly, that I was being strategic, that distance was the responsible choice, and none of that was true. I was just afraid, and I dressed it up as strategy because strategy is a language I trust and fear isn't." Nathan stood in his kitchen, phone pressed to his ear, and let her talk. He'd learned, over these past months, that Victoria Hale rarely needed prompting. Once she finally decided to speak, what she needed was room, and silence, and someone who wouldn't rush her toward a conclusion before she'd earned her way there herself. "Adrian used to say I ran everything like a boardroom," she continued. "And even us, even our marriage." He meant it as an insult, and for years I believed him, and it made me question every decision I made that came from somewhere other than pure calculation. But sitting alone in this apartment for 3 weeks, doing the responsible, strategic thing, pushing you away to protect you, her voice caught. It didn't feel like strength, Nathan. It felt like the loneliest decision I've ever made, dressed up in language that made it sound noble. "And I know," Nathan said quietly. I could hear it, even from the other side of it. "I keep thinking about what you said. That I was letting him win by becoming the version of myself he always wanted, someone who protects herself by refusing to need anything from anyone." A long breath on the other end of the line. "I've spent 3 years proving to myself that I don't need people. That I'm better off without needing anyone. And it worked, mostly, because I built an entire life efficient enough that the absence of connection barely registered most days. Until a wrong text message showed up on my phone, and for reasons I still don't fully understand, I got in my car and drove to a stranger's apartment instead of doing what I should have done, which was delete the message and move on with my evening. I'm glad you didn't do what you should have done," Nathan said. A small, surprised laugh came through the phone, the first one he'd heard from her in weeks, fragile but real. "And so am I, that's the terrifying part. Victoria." He said her name carefully, like he was setting something down that could still break. "What do you want? Not what's strategic. Not what protects you from Adrian, or from the board, or from the headlines. What do you actually want?" The line went quiet for a long moment. Nathan could hear faintly, the sound of a city outside her windows, distant traffic, the particular hush of an apartment built for one person who had, for a long time, believed one person was all she'd ever need. "I want to stop being afraid of you," Victoria said finally. "I want to stop treating the best thing that's happened to me in years like a threat I need to manage. I want," her voice wavered and steadied, "I want to see you. Tomorrow, if that's not too soon. In person. Not as your employer giving direction. As myself." Nathan closed his eyes, and something that had been sitting heavy in his chest for 3 weeks finally loosened. "Tomorrow," he said. "Name the place." They met at a small park 2 blocks from Nathan's apartment, a modest patch of green wedged between 2 apartment buildings, with a single bench facing a fountain that hadn't worked properly in years, the kind of unremarkable, overlooked place that neither of them would have chosen if either of them had been thinking strategically about optics, which was. Nathan understood exactly the point. Victoria had chosen a place with nothing to prove. She was already sitting on the bench when he arrived, dressed differently than he'd ever seen her, no blazer, no severe, tailored lines, just a simple sweater and jean, hair down instead of pulled back, and for a moment Nathan almost didn't recognize her, not because she looked different exactly, but because she looked so entirely unguarded that it changed the whole shape of her. He sat down beside her. Neither of them spoke for a moment. "I fired someone this morning," Victoria said finally. "Okay, not for cause related to Adrian. Someone in communications who I discovered, after some quiet digging, had been feeding internal details to a reporter for the last 3 weeks. Small things. Nothing that would show up on any formal review, a comment in a hallway, an offhand remark about scheduling, enough breadcrumbs for someone determined to build up on nothing." She looked at Nathan. "I wanted you to know that not everyone was against you. Most of the building had no idea any of this was happening beyond what they read online. It was one person, motivated by resentment over a promotion they didn't get 18 months ago, and Adrian's people found them and paid them well to talk. How do you know all that? Because I hired someone whose entire job is knowing things like that, Victoria said. It's not a satisfying answer. But it's the truth, and I promised myself I'd stop protecting you from truths, even the complicated ones. Nathan absorbed that for a moment. Does firing them fix anything? No, Victoria admitted. The articles are still out there. The narrative has mostly run its course in the news cycle, but it doesn't disappear from search results. Someone could still find it. Lily could still find it someday if she goes looking. Her voice softened. I can't undo what's already been written. I can only tell you that I'm done letting it dictate what I do next. Nathan looked out at the broken fountain, water pooling uselessly at its base instead of rising the way it was designed to. Adrian's not going to stop, he said. You told me that yourself. No, Victoria agreed. He's not. Not because of the logistics division, I think, by now. That's almost beside the point for him. He's not really after an acquisition. He's after proof that he can still reach me. That no matter how far I've built myself away from him, he can still find the pressure point and press it. She turned to face Nathan fully. Which means the only way to actually stop him isn't to hide the pressure point. It's to take away his ability to use it. I have to stop being afraid of what he can do. Because as long as I'm afraid, he has power over me. The moment I stop being afraid, the moment I choose you anyway, openly, without apology, there's nothing left for him to threaten. That sounds simple when you say it like that. It's not simple, Victoria said. It's terrifying. I've thought about very little else for 3 weeks. But I'd rather be terrified and honest than safe and alone. I spent 3 years being safe and alone, Nathan, and I want you to really understand that I wasn't happy. I was managing. There's a difference, and I only understood the difference once I had something to compare it to. Nathan reached over and took her hand. She let him. Her fingers were cold, and they tightened around his, like she'd been waiting for permission to hold on to something. I'm not going anywhere, Nathan said. Whatever Adrian throws next, whatever the board says, whatever anyone whispers in the hallway. I've spent 6 years being underestimated by people who assumed a single dad with no MBA couldn't really compete. I know how to survive people underestimating me. I don't need protecting from that. I need you to trust that I chose this with my eyes open. I do trust that, Victoria said. I just needed the 3 weeks and one very honest phone call to remember that trusting it was allowed. They didn't solve everything on that park bench. Nathan understood, even in the moment, that this wasn't a resolution so much as a beginning, the actual work of rebuilding trust after a break, however brief, still ahead of them both. But something had shifted back into alignment. Some structural piece of the thing between them that had cracked under pressure and was now, carefully, being reset. Over the following days, Victoria did something Nathan hadn't fully expected. She stopped managing the situation from behind closed doors and started, deliberately, doing the opposite of everything Adrian had counted on. She gave a short, controlled interview to a respected business journalist, not defensive, not combative, simply factual, laying out Nathan's qualifications and performance record with the same precision she brought to every board presentation, and closing with a single line that ran as the article's pull quote. I don't apologize for recognizing talent, and I don't apologize for caring about the people I work with. If that's controversial, I'm comfortable being controversial. The internet, as it tended to do, moved on within days to a different controversy entirely. But inside the company, something had changed. People who had whispered behind Nathan's back for weeks found themselves recalibrating, watching their CEO stand publicly and unapologetically behind him, watching the confidence with which she'd done it, and slowly, the whispers thinned into something closer to grudging respect, or at least neutral silence, which after weeks of hostility felt to Nathan almost like relief. Ben, the junior analyst who'd been avoiding him for weeks, stopped him in the break room on a Thursday. Hey, Ben said, awkward, hands shoved in his pockets. I wanted to say I'm sorry, for the weirdness the last few weeks. I let a lot of noise get in my head, and I didn't think about how it actually affected you. You've always been straight with me on projects. That should have counted for more than it did. I appreciate you saying that, Nathan said, and meant it. Also, Ben added, the Meridian restructuring you ran, genuinely the cleanest handoff I've seen in 2 years here. Whatever people were saying about how you got promoted, that part at least was never in question. Not really. Not once anyone actually looked at the work. Nathan nodded, feeling something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for a month. It wasn't vindication exactly. It was simpler than that, just the quiet, unglamorous satisfaction of being seen, finally, for the actual work rather than the story someone else had tried to write about him. Adrian's next move came 10 days later, and it was smaller than Nathan expected, though Victoria warned him it would be Adrian's style, she explained, was never one dramatic strike but a series of smaller pressures designed to wear down resistance over time, the way water eventually cuts through stone, not through force but through patience. This time it wasn't the press. It was a formal letter to the Hale Corporation Board, filed through Adrian's lawyers, raising governance concerns about the CEO's judgment and requesting a formal review of recent executive appointments. It was couched in careful, lawyerly language, nothing overtly personal, nothing that could be easily dismissed as harassment, just enough procedural weight to force the board to at least discuss it. Victoria called an emergency session. Nathan wasn't in the room, he had no standing to be, and both of them understood that his presence would only feed the narrative Adrian was trying to construct, but she called him the moment it ended, voice tired but steady. How did it go? Nathan asked. The board voted to dismiss the request unanimously, Victoria said. One member, Harold, the oldest one, been on the board almost as long as the companies existed, actually laughed out loud when the letter was read aloud. Said, and I'm quoting him directly, if Adrian Cross wants to lecture anyone about governance, he should start with his own firm, which had 3 compliance violations last year that somehow never made it into any headlines. Nathan felt something loosen in his chest. So it's over. That particular attempt, yes. A pause. I don't think Adrian's finished. I think this is what losing looks like to him at first, an escalation, not a retreat. But the board stood behind me completely, Nathan. And more importantly, they stood behind the decision to promote you specifically. Harold pulled me aside afterward and told me your performance reviews were some of the strongest he'd seen from anyone at your level in a decade. He said, if anything, the controversy has made him more confident in my judgment, not less, because I refused to let it change my decision under pressure. That's good news. It is, Victoria agreed. I wanted you to hear it from me directly, not read about it in some internal memo. There was a warmth in her voice that Nathan hadn't heard even at the height of their earlier closeness, something steadier now, less fragile, like a bridge that had been tested under load and had held. It was around this time that Lily got her rain check. Victoria showed up on a Saturday afternoon at Nathan's apartment, not summoned there by any accident or crisis this time, but invited, deliberately, by both of them, a plan discussed and agreed upon days in advance. She arrived carrying a small, carefully wrapped box that turned out to contain a stuffed cat, gray with green button eyes, because Lily had apparently made an impression significant enough that Victoria had remembered, weeks later, the entire courtroom drama-inspired campaign for pet ownership. I can't authorize a real cat, Victoria told Lily solemnly, crouching down again with that same total seriousness she'd brought to their first meeting by the elevators. That's outside my jurisdiction. But I thought this might serve as interim counsel. Lily accepted the stuffed cat with the gravity of a judge accepting new evidence. What's his name? That's for you to decide. I'm not in a position to name your cat. Conflict of interest. Lily considered this very seriously, holding the cat up to examine it from several angles. Noodle too, she announced finally. Because Gerald already has a noodle, and this way they can be friends. An excellent choice, Victoria said. Very diplomatic. Nathan stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching this exchange with an ache in his chest that had nothing to do with sadness. He thought about the version of Victoria Hale that existed on magazine covers. The one that had fired executives with 3 words and had reduced men twice her age to stammering apologies in board meetings. And he thought about this version kneeling on his living room carpet. The negotiating cat names with an 8-year-old like it was the most important business she'd conducted all week. He understood watching it that this was the real Victoria. The other one, the armor. The precision. The untouchable CEO that had always been the performance. Built out of necessity. Maintained out of habit. This was underneath it. This was what she'd been protecting all along. They ordered pizza. Lily insisted on pineapple, which Victoria accepted without comment, despite what Nathan suspected. Based on a very small flicker of her expression, were strong private opinions about pineapple on pizza. They sat at the small kitchen table with the scratch on the corner. 3 plates instead of the usual 2. And for a stretch of maybe 40 minutes. Nobody mentioned Adrian Cross. Or board meetings. Or headlines. Or anything at all beyond the immediate. Ordinary pleasure of pizza and a stuffed cat named Noodle 2 and Lily's detailed. Unprompted account of a disagreement she'd had with a classmate over whose turn it was to feed the class hamster. Nathan watched Victoria laugh, a real laugh, unguarded, at something Lily said about the hamster's opinions on the matter, and felt something settle deep in his chest that he hadn't let himself feel in longer than he could easily measure. This was what he wanted. Not the drama, not the headlines, not the fight with Adrian Cross that was clearly still unfolding somewhere in the background of all of their lives. This pizza at a scratched kitchen table. A little girl negotiating stuffed animal diplomacy. A woman learning. Slowly and carefully. What it felt like to let herself be happy in an ordinary room with ordinary people. After Lily went to bed that night. Worn out from an afternoon of excitement. Victoria and Nathan sat together on the couch. The apartment quiet around them. She's remarkable, Victoria said softly. I don't think I've laughed like that in years. Actually laughed. Not the calibrated version I do in rooms where people are watching to see what my laugh means. She has that effect on people, Nathan said. Wears you down until you forget to perform. I noticed. Victoria was quiet for a moment, looking at her hands. I never had children. It wasn't Adrian didn't want them, and by the time I might have wanted them on my own, I'd built a life that didn't have room. I used to tell myself that was fine. That I'd chosen a different kind of life, and different wasn't worse. She looked up at Nathan. Sitting at that table tonight. I understood, for the first time in a long time, that I hadn't actually made peace with that. I just stopped letting myself think about it. You don't have to have all of that figured out, Nathan said gently. Not tonight. Not because of one dinner. I know. She leaned her head against his shoulder, an easy, natural gesture that surprised them both with how easy it felt. I just wanted you to know that tonight mattered. More than I expected it to. They sat like that for a long time, the apartment quiet, the city faint and distant outside the windows, and for the first time in weeks, Nathan let himself believe, fully and without reservation, that whatever came next with Adrian Cross, whatever the board decided, whatever the headlines eventually said or didn't say, this, at least, was real. This was worth whatever it cost to protect it. Adrian's final attempt came 3 weeks later, and it was, in the end, the most desperate and the least effective. He requested a private meeting with Victoria, not through lawyers this time, not through the press, but a direct, almost pleading email that arrived on a Tuesday morning, asking for 20 minutes, framing it as an attempt at closure rather than business. Victoria showed the email to Nathan before responding, a gesture that would have been unthinkable 3 months earlier and now felt, to both of them, like the most natural thing in the world. Do you want to go? Nathan asked. I think I need to, Victoria said. Not because I owe him anything. Because I think, until I sit across from him one more time on my own terms instead of his, some part of me is still going to be afraid of what he might do next. I want to close that door myself. Deliberately. Not because he decided to open it. Do you want me there? Victoria considered this for a long moment. No, she said finally. This is something I need to do alone. But I want you to know I'm doing it, and I want you to know exactly what I'm going to say to him before I say it. Okay, she told him. Nathan listened, and by the time she finished, he understood that whatever fear had driven her into that apartment 3 weeks earlier, whatever fear had made her try to push him away to protect them both from Adrian's reach, had finally, fully burned itself out. They met at a neutral restaurant, quiet, mid-afternoon, chosen specifically because it belonged to neither of their usual worlds. Victoria arrived first and was seated when Adrian walked in, still handsome in the particular polished way that had once impressed her, and now simply registered as a fact about him rather than a feeling. Still moving through a room like he expected it to rearrange itself around his presence. You look well, Adrian said, sitting down across from her. I am well, Victoria said. Say what you came to say, Adrian. I have a 4 o'clock. He smiled, a flicker of the old charm surfacing and then, just as quickly, fading when he registered that it wasn't landing the way it once had. I underestimated you. I'll admit that. I thought the pressure would work the way it always worked. I thought you'd fold the way you used to fold, and quietly distance yourself from the situation to make the noise go away. I know you thought that, Victoria said. It's why you tried it. It's also why it failed. The board dismissed my letter. Unanimously, Victoria said. With enthusiasm, actually. Harold called your compliance record into the room, without me even asking him to. Something flickered across Adrian's face. Irritation quickly smoothed over. I still think you're making a mistake. Personally involving yourself with an employee. It's messy. It's exactly the kind of thing that erodes an organization from the inside, and you know that better than anyone, Victoria. You built your entire reputation on never letting personal weakness affect professional judgment. I used to believe that too, Victoria said. I believed it for 4 years of marriage to you, and it made me smaller every single year, because you taught me that anything I cared about was a liability I needed to manage, rather than something worth protecting. I'm not that person anymore, Adrian. I spent 3 years rebuilding myself after you, and somewhere in the last few months, I finally understood the thing I got wrong. In the rebuilding, I built a version of myself that couldn't be hurt. But I also built a version of myself that couldn't feel anything real. Those turned out to be the same wall. Adrian was quiet for a moment. So this is it, he said finally. You're choosing him. Publicly, permanently. I already did, Victoria said. Weeks ago. Everything since then has just been you finding out. He's not going to understand you the way I did. Adrian said. And there was something almost desperate in it now. The polish finally cracking to reveal something smaller and more human underneath. He doesn't know your world. He's not built for it. You're right, Victoria said. He's not built for my world. He's built something better, a world where kindness isn't a weakness someone can exploit, where a person can say something true without it being filed away for later use. I spent 4 years in your world, Adrian, learning to be smaller and safer. I'd rather spend the rest of my life in his. She stood, smoothing her jacket with the same composed precision she brought to every boardroom, and looked down at the man who had spent 4 years teaching her that love was a transaction that always, eventually, came due. Don't contact me again, Victoria said. Not about the logistics division. Not about the board. Not about anything. Whatever this was between us, it's finished. I finished it just now, on my own terms, which is the only way I was ever going to be able to close it. She left him sitting there, alone at the table, and walked out into the afternoon light without once looking back. She called Nathan from the car. It's done, she said. All the way done. How do you feel? There was a pause on the line, and when she spoke again, her voice carried something Nathan hadn't heard in it before. Not relief exactly, though there was relief in it, but something closer to lightness, the particular unburdened feeling of a weight finally set down after being carried so long you'd forgotten what it felt like to walk without it. Free, Victoria said. I feel free, Nathan. For the first time in longer than I can remember. Come home, Nathan said, and the word slipped out before he'd fully considered it. Not come over, not come to my apartment, but home, and he heard himself say it and didn't take it back, because somewhere in the last few months, without either of them quite naming it out loud, that was exactly what it had become. On my way, Victoria said, and Nathan could hear, even through the phone, that she was smiling. Victoria arrived at Nathan's apartment 20 minutes later, and when he opened the door, she didn't say anything at all. She just stepped inside and put her arms around him, and Nathan held her in the doorway of his small apartment the way he'd wanted to hold her for weeks, without calculation, without fear of what it would cost either of them. It's really over, she said into his shoulder. I keep waiting to feel like I lost something. I don't. I feel like I finally put down something I'd been carrying so long I forgot it was heavy. That's not losing, Nathan said. That's the opposite of losing. She pulled back and looked at him, and there was something different in her face now, not the careful composure of the CEO. Not even the fragile honesty of the woman who'd called him 3 weeks ago at her lowest point. Something steadier than either. Something that looked, for the first time since Nathan had known her, entirely at peace. I want to tell you something, Victoria said, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. Okay. When you sent that text 3 months ago, I sat in my car outside your building for 4.5 minutes trying to decide what to do. I told you that already. What I didn't tell you was what I was actually thinking during those 4.5 minutes. She took a breath. I was thinking that I had built an entire life around never being surprised by anything. Every decision calculated. Every relationship managed for maximum efficiency and minimum vulnerability. And then a message meant for someone else landed on my phone. And for 4.5 minutes. Sitting alone in that car, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt curious. Not about the message itself, about what kind of man writes something like that and means it. About what it would feel like to be looked at that way, even by accident. Victoria minus. Let me finish. She smiled, soft, unguarded. I drove to your apartment because I told myself I was handling a workplace situation responsibly. That was a lie, I told myself, so I wouldn't have to admit the truth, which was that I was lonely in a way I'd stopped letting myself name. And something in that accidental message cracked the door open, just wide enough for me to see through it. Everything since then, the coffee, the promotion, the text about vendors that weren't really about vendors, even pushing you away, even this, all of it started with me choosing curiosity over safety for the first time in years. And I need you to know that choosing it again, right now, standing in this doorway, is the easiest decision I've made in longer than I can remember. Nathan reached up and touched her face, and she leaned into his hand the way a person leans into something they've finally allowed themselves to trust. I love you, he said simply. The words arriving without the weight he'd expected them to carry. Landing instead like something that had been true for a while, and was only now getting said out loud. Not the CEO. Not the woman on the magazine covers. You, the person who crouches down to talk to an 8-year-old about stuffed cats. The person who drank cheap coffee at my kitchen table and asked about my daughter like she actually wanted to know the answer. I love you too, Victoria said, and for the first time since Nathan had met her, she said it without armor, without calculation, without a single careful qualification trailing behind it. I love you, Nathan Brooks. Ordinary apartment. Scratched kitchen table. All of it. The weeks that followed unfolded with a quiet, unremarkable happiness that Nathan found himself savoring, precisely because it was unremarkable, because after months of headlines and whispered hallway gossip and a fight against a man who'd spent 4 years teaching Victoria that love was a weakness, ordinary happiness felt like the rarest thing either of them had ever earned. At the office, things settled into a rhythm nobody questioned anymore. The story of Nathan's promotion, once fodder for gossip and speculation, had simply become old news, replaced in the collective attention span of the company by whatever new drama had since taken its place. Ben and Nathan grabbed lunch together most Fridays now, an easy friendship that had grown out of an awkward apology in a break room. Priya, who'd never quite warmed to Nathan during those first tense weeks, eventually admitted, over a shared late night finishing a board deck, that she'd initially assumed he was exactly what the rumors suggested, and that watching him actually work had been the thing that changed her mind, not any statement Victoria made, not any board decision, just the accumulated evidence of showing up and doing good work, day after day, the same discipline that had carried Nathan through 6 years of single fatherhood. You know, Priya said, closing her laptop that night, for what it's worth, I think you're good for her. She used to eat lunch alone at her desk every single day. Now she actually leaves the building sometimes. I didn't do anything special, Nathan said. I just sent a text to the wrong person. Priya laughed. Sometimes that's all it takes. The universe finding a loophole around everyone's careful plans. Lily adjusted to Victoria's presence in their lives with the effortless, uncomplicated grace that only children seem capable of. No anxiety about what it meant. No elaborate questions about the future. Just a steady, expanding acceptance that this new person was simply part of things now. The way a new season arrives without announcement and is somehow, within weeks, impossible to imagine being without. She started calling Victoria for help with her math homework. On the theory, entirely her own, that someone who runs a whole company probably knows numbers really well, which turned out to be true, and which led to Sunday afternoons at the kitchen table, with the scratch on the corner, three heads bent over worksheets, Victoria patiently walking an 8-year-old through long division, with the same careful precision she brought to quarterly earnings reports. "You're really good at this," Lily told her one Sunday, looking up from a worksheet full of correctly solved problems. "Better than Dad." "I heard that," Nathan called from the kitchen. "It's true and you know it," Victoria said, not looking up, the corner of her mouth doing that thing it did, now more and more often, not the careful, guarded almost smile from those first weeks, but something fuller, something that had learned slowly, that it was allowed to exist all the way. Carol met her 3 weeks after the dinner with Adrian. At a family gathering, Nathan had approached with more nervousness than he'd expected, given everything they'd already survived together. Carol, ever protective, spent the first hour watching Victoria with the careful, evaluating eyes of an older sister who had picked her brother up off the floor more than once, and had no intention of watching it happen again. But somewhere around the second hour, watching Victoria help Lily build an elaborate blanket fort in the living room, laughing at something Lily said with a laugh that had nothing performed or calculated about it, Carol pulled Nathan aside in the kitchen. "Okay," Carol said. "I see it." "See what?" "Whatever it is that made you look less alone than you've looked in 6 years." She studied him for a moment. "You did good, Nathan. I mean that. You did really good." Nathan felt something warm settle in his chest, the particular relief of a person whose family finally sees what he's been quietly hoping they'd see. Dave predictably took full credit. "I put you on that app," he reminded Nathan over eggs at the diner, months later. Victoria having gracefully declined the invitation that morning to give the two old friends their standing Saturday ritual. "None of this happens without me. You put me on the app to meet Rachel." "Details," Dave said, waving a fork dismissively. "The point is, I got the ball rolling. Everything after that is just downstream effects. You're taking credit for a typo." "I'm taking credit for pushing a scared, lonely man out of a rut he'd been sitting in for 6 years, Dave said, more seriously now, setting his fork down. "I watched you build a wall so high nothing could get over it, man. I watched you convince yourself you were fine being alone, because it hurt less than wanting something and not getting it. And then somehow, through the single most improbable accident I've ever witnessed in 20 years of friendship, you ended up with the wall knocked flat and something real standing on the other side of it. I don't care how it happened. I'm just glad it did." Nathan looked at his old friend, the one who'd sat across from countless diner breakfast over the years, patiently absorbing every version of Nathan's careful, well-managed loneliness, and felt a gratitude he didn't entirely know how to put into words. "Thanks, Dave," he said simply. "Don't get sentimental on me," Dave said, but he was smiling. The board asked Victoria, 6 months after everything had settled, to speak at the company's annual leadership conference, not about strategy, not about quarterly performance, but about resilience, about navigating a public crisis without losing the values that had built the company in the first place. She agreed reluctantly, uncomfortable with the personal nature of the request, and spent 2 weeks drafting and redrafting remarks that kept feeling to her, either too guarded or too revealing. Nathan found her at the kitchen table one night, his kitchen table, still scratched, still theirs in some way that had become permanent, without either of them formally deciding it, staring at a laptop screen with an expression of genuine frustration. "I don't know how to talk about this without sounding either cold or like I'm performing vulnerability for an audience," she said. "Neither one is honest." "Then don't perform either one," Nathan said, sitting across from her. "Just tell them what you told me on the phone that night. That you'd built a life around not needing anyone, and it worked, until it didn't. And the bravest thing you ever did wasn't running a company through a crisis. It was admitting you were scared and picking up the phone anyway. Victoria looked at him for a long moment. That's exactly the speech, she said, and started typing. She delivered it 3 weeks later. In front of 400 employees and a handful of board members. And Nathan watched from the back of the room as she stood at the podium. Without notes for the last several minutes. And told a room full of professionals that the most valuable lesson of her career hadn't come from a boardroom at all. It had come from an accidental text message. A chipped coffee mug. And a single father who'd taught her that honesty. Offered without armor. Was worth more than any strategy she'd ever executed. I spent years believing that vulnerability and leadership were opposites. Victoria told the room. Her voice steady. Carrying easily across the space. That the two couldn't coexist. That showing up as a whole person, instead of a title, was a liability I couldn't afford. I was wrong. The version of me that let someone in. That admitted fear instead of managing it into invisibility, that version built a stronger company. Not a weaker one. Because a leader who's at peace with herself makes better decisions than a leader running from something she's spent years refusing to name. The room was silent when she finished. Then it wasn't applause building genuine. Sustained. And Nathan watched Victoria Hale. The woman who'd once fired executives with 3 words and never smiled in meetings. Stand at that podium with tears in her eyes that she made no effort to hide. He caught her eye across the room. She found him instantly. Like she always did now. Like some invisible thread connected them regardless of distance. And the look she gave him needed no words at all. They got married the following spring. In Carol's backyard. Small and unpretentious. Exactly the opposite of the kind of wedding anyone would have expected for a woman who ran a $400 million company. No press, no magazine coverage. Just family. A handful of close friends. Dave serving as an enthusiastic and slightly over-involved best man. And Lily 8 going on 9 by then, serving as flower girl, with a level of ceremonial gravity that suggested she considered the role every bit as important as any board position. Do you, Victoria? Take Nathan. The officiant began. And Victoria. Standing in a simple dress in her sister-in-law's backyard. Looked at Nathan with an expression that held nothing back at all. No armor. No calculation. No careful management of vulnerability. Just a woman, finally and completely herself, choosing the life she'd once believed she wasn't allowed to want. I do, she said, and her voice didn't waver once. Afterward. At the small reception under string lights, Carol had spent the entire previous week hanging with an almost religious dedication to the aesthetic. Lily climbed onto Nathan's lap during the toast. Tired and happy in the particular way children get at the end of long, exciting days. Are you happy, Dad? She asked, looking up at him with the same frank, unfiltered directness she'd once used to ask a stranger by an elevator bank if she was a queen. Nathan looked across the yard at Victoria, laughing at something Dave was saying. Her head tilted back, entirely unguarded, entirely present. A woman who had spent years building walls so high nothing could get over them, and had finally, deliberately, chosen to tear them down instead. Yeah, baby, Nathan said, pulling his daughter closer. I'm happy. I'm the happiest I've ever been, because of the text you sent to the wrong person. Nathan laughed a real laugh. Full and unguarded. The kind he'd forgotten he was capable of during those long years of eating pasta alone at a kitchen counter. Convinced that ordinary happiness was something that happened to other people. Because of the text I sent to the wrong person, he agreed. Across the yard, Victoria caught his eye again, and smiled the full, unguarded smile that had once been so rare, so carefully rationed, and was now simply how she smiled, all the time, at everyone, but especially at him. A single mistake, sent late one lonely night by a tired, hopeful man who'd nearly forgotten what it felt like to want something. A knock on a door 5 minutes later that changed the shape of 2 lives forever. A CEO who learned that strength and softness were never opposites at all. And a single father who learned that he had never needed saving, only someone willing to see the man who'd been there. Quietly worthy. All along. The mistake had been an accident. Everything that came after it was the truest thing either of them had ever built. and in a modest backyard filled with string lights and laughter. Ad. Two people who had once believed love was a risk too dangerous to take stood together as proof of exactly the opposite, that sometimes the wrong message, ad, sent to the right person, ad, is simply the universe finding its way to where it always meant to go.